And so now, it's story time with Katie McLaughlin, who's here to talk to us about anxiety, software, ice cream, pubs, and community. So please welcome Katie.
So I'm in a pub in Auckland, as you do. It's 2013, and I've just attended my first open source software conference. Open Source Developers Conference was run in Auckland that year, OSDC, you might have heard of it. Paul Fenwick has just given the closing keynote, and a bunch of delegates have retired to the bar. There was a bunch of organisers rounding up a group of people wanting to see who wanted to go to see Gravity in the cinema. And I'm standing next to a guy with dreads. This was a pretty good conference, I say. Well, I'm glad you agree, he replies. Some of the talks were really interesting. I reckon I could give it a go and give a talk next year. You should tweet about that. So, using the slang of the time, I put this up on Twitter. I'm going to present at OSDC 2014 next year. The topic is still in progress, but I'm going to lock it in now, Eddie. Moments later, I get a notification. Someone has retweeted your tweet. Ah. Turns out the bloke with the dreads is Ben Deckerai, who sort of co-founded OSDC. The best person to talk to at a pub after a conference, right? This was the start of my journey into public speaking and open source community wrangling. I've told this story before in many a pub, and it's been affectionately referred to as my superhero origin story. What follows next is my trials. So I'm in a public square in Brisbane, as you do. It's 2015, a wonderful winter's afternoon, and I'm holding on to an ice cream for a friend while they are saying hello to some really cute little Labrador puppies. What I'm supposed to be doing right then is giving a talk. PyCon 2015, my first Python developers conference, I was supposed to give 2 talks. This wasn't the first time I'd been asked to give 2 talks at a conference, so I thought I'd be fine. I'd been public speaking for months, overseas and everything. New Zealand is overseas, yeah. But 2 brand new talks at a conference for a first-time speaker, yeah. The first talk on Saturday went fine. It was this wonderful tirade, name drop fun of acknowledging open source contributions that aren't code, now affectionately referred to as the hat rack talk. The second talk never happened. Thankfully, today, 2 years on, I've been given the opportunity to finally give that talk at PyCon. The following slides are true to the 2015 version with some updates for time, so I apologise for the animated GIFs. But if you'll indulge me, there's also going to be a commentary track involved here, and I'll give context as we go along. So, hi, I'm Katie. My Twitter handle is hidden somewhere on this slide, and I'm going to talk about how to handle abandoned projects. Even now, just trying to start this talk is hard. What should I say? Where do I start? Should I give any context about the content I'm about to present? Does the context matter? I mean, this talk is clearly about project abandonment, so something must have happened to a project that I was working on, right? Was it burnout? Was it loss of interest? Was it the unexpected passing of a maintainer? I could share all the tips, tricks, configuration hacks and such that I've learnt along this trip, but do I do that without the context? Does the context matter? Yes, it bloody well does matter, and I'm going to tell you all the context right now because this is the exact start of this talk is what tripped me up first time I tried to give it in 2015. As you will see, a bunch of the things I'm going to cover is GitHub, but that's because that's what I used at the time, that's what I still use at the time. But this is a talk not just about the configuration, it's about the story, and without the story, it's not much of a talk. A few weeks after PyCon, I did give this talk again at SydPHP, a Sydney PHP user group. Funnily enough, it's in the name. I did the talk saying that the context was it happened to a friend of mine. That was bull. But it let me get past the context and into the content, and that's what I needed. But now I'm here revisiting the story. And yes, the human story does absolutely matter. And yes, you could Google all this stuff about how to migrate projects, how to do push button get repo on GitHub. You could Google all this stuff, but without the story behind it, it's pretty boring. So I'm in an office in Sydney, as you do. It's 2015, it's a Tuesday. A month earlier, I've just come back from giving my first international talk at a conference talking about a project I'd been working on at a company for about a year at this point. The project had gotten some traction at the conference. I'd gotten some really good feedback, and so I was beavering it away, making improvements in the week since. It's a few minutes before stand-up, and I've just cracked this functionality hack in Elasticsearch that meant we could store some complex data set within the system that meant a function that we'd been wanting to implement for ages was just nearly achievable. So I'm bouncing on my feet at this point because I'm really excited to share what I'd learned in stand-up. And then I get called into the CTO's office. Effective immediately, I'm no longer employed at the company. My role has been made redundant. A quarter of the department was walked out that day. By the end of the year, most of who were in the team left of their own accord. I was shattered. I'd been working at this place for 4 years at this point, my first role that even touched open source. I'd been learning so much, and I was actively encouraged to share that with others, which is a huge difference compared to the 6 years previous of closed source software development that I was doing. And I mean, I was a poster child for this place, literally on posters, which is really weird when you see your face coming up in a Google ad, especially after you've been fired. But in this case, I was lucky. I was able to find a new job relatively quickly thanks to a friend and former co-worker. And yeah, I was incredibly lucky, especially because I was let go after I gave the talk at the international conference. I know some people aren't so lucky in this situation. It can take time to find a new job, especially with a sudden change of circumstance. But having represented the company, putting my name against this company, it was really hard. 6 weeks after I'd given an international talk, but I've seen people give that talk where they've been on the Keynote list talking about a company that no longer employs them, when they're on the ground organising an event only to be told that their services are no longer required during the event. It's heartbreaking to watch these people's lives fall around them, and yet I have utmost respect for those people that soldier on, keep a professional face, and keep going. Lucky I didn't have to put up with that shit, so yay. Time passes, and I'm settled into my new role, and I start considering what I could do about the project that I left behind. And thus the original talk content continues. This is where the technical talk happens. This is the easy bit. In this case, the project was open source in a public repo on GitHub, so the solution should be bang easy, right? Just fork it. Well, no. Thing is, GitHub doesn't do forking. I will explain. They don't implement the traditional forking methodology regardless of what the marketing says. There's even more issues involved. Licensing you have to consider if you're taking code that may have a different label of a competitor company, and if the content is dead source. So, GitHub forking is not traditional forking. Sure, you can click a button and you can get a copy of the code under your username, but it's not a full working copy with all the bells and whistles of an original GitHub repo. It's really good if you want to contribute to the original, but if you're trying to take it as a fork, it doesn't work. It can come as a bit of a surprise when you try to click button get repo and all of a sudden you have all these limitations. There's a parent lock-in involved. If you click button, you end up getting, here's the name of your repo, here is the name of the repo that it's forked from, and that will always appear, no matter what view on GitHub you have. By default, if you try to create a pull request on your fork, it will immediately say, do you want to make a pull request up to upstream? Which is really fun. Before you could change what branch you were wanting to make a pull request on, because you can't delete PRs, and all of a sudden when you're putting in specific company code that accidentally goes upstream, you cannot delete your PR. I haven't had that happen to me. No, not sir. No, sir. By default, on forks, you cannot log issues. So if you're planning to have a fork of your project be its own ecosystem, you have to go into the settings and enable this. And commits don't count. If you've seen my wonderful hat rack talk, the wonderful commit graph, you can be beavering away, making your own fork of your project, all these wonderful things, and you do not get a single green square on your graph. Licensing. Licensing is fun because there are laws about this stuff that you really shouldn't ignore. It also depends on what site you're on about what rules apply. GitHub code on GitHub without a license is by default all rights reserved. You cannot use it at all. So you should really put licensing on your code if you're going to be putting it in a public GitHub repo. The choice of license is not something that I'm going to go into during this talk, except to reference all the wonderful resources about how to choose a license. Of note though, different websites have different defaults. If you take code from Stackoverflow, the code is licensed MIT, everything else is CC by SA. This is a fairly recent change because up until 2016, everything was CC by SA, which really doesn't make sense for code. You are released from having to copy the MIT license from code that you copy from Stackoverflow as long as you give attribution to the original author. Speaking of licenses, it really gets fun when you start copying competitor code, because in the terms of the license, depending on which license you use, you have to keep their original copyright, which makes it fun when you have, say, Google 2014, Bing 2015. Yeah. But then there's dead source. If the upstream is dead and unmaintained, it's an inhibitor of innovation. There will be no mergers and no changes upstream of your code. And if you want to fork a repo and then continue on the project, you have no way of communicating upstream that this is what you're doing. So your fork might be churning away, but people Googling a solution and finding the dead upstream won't see your fork. So what do? Ask. There are many possible solutions to this particular problem, including transferring of ownership and updating references and documentation. But why should you care? Why is this important? There is an elephant in this room that needs to be addressed. PHP 4 should already be dead. PHP 5 will die in the immediate future. When everyone upgrades their various language versions, old code will need to come along or it'll be lost. And it's not just PHP. If you're using Ruby 1.8 or 1.9, your software is end of life and does not have security updates, and you really, really, really should update to Ruby 2, which is a particular concern when, as 2015 as a Ruby dev, this was important to my talk content. PyDebugger did not work with Ruby 2, and none of the documentation on the PyDebugger README mentioned this. You had to go splunking and working out in various mailing lists what would work for Ruby 2. Thankfully, since they have updated their documentation saying, hi, you should really use bybug if you want to use inline debugging on Ruby 2. This is pretty much the equivalent of PDB, inline breakpoints and interactive such. But yeah, that's PHP and Ruby, right? This is a Python conference. Python 2 will be end of life in 2 years, 7 months, 6 days, 15 hours, 29 minutes, and 56, 55, 54, 53. Many projects are moving away from Python 2.7 support, but the version of Python itself is not going to have any updates after April 2020, which means there are not going to be any security updates, which means if anyone finds a problem with Python 2.7, it will never be fixed. And Python 3 is great. You should all move your projects to Python 3. Python 3 supports emoji. It's great. But I can hear the people up there, porting is boring. I don't want to port my code. There's no satisfaction in it, especially when no one else is porting their code, and I've got to port their code before I can port my code. But if your code isn't ported and Python 2.7 goes end of life, then you are actively encouraging people to run insecure versions of languages and inviting a whole plethora of problems. It's important to make sure that you are not actively encouraging security vulnerabilities. And there's other non-language dependent features as well with trying to make sure that projects stay alive. Google Code. Since this talk, you can no longer export things off of Google Code. The export utilities just don't work anymore. And there's also SourceForge, which back in 2015 had a wonderful little issue where people were saying that SourceForge were updating their binaries for people and adding malware to make it look like, oh, the binary has changed. This is the new version. Allegedly, there was spyware, allegedly, but no one uses SourceForge anymore, it's fine. Projects are going to need attention. Any active project is going to need someone to poke it and make sure it's still okay. The maintainer may be off growing grapes somewhere, but hostile forks don't help anyone. So, what can you do? If you have a project and you wish to not have to support it anymore, you can abandon responsibly. Or if you see a project that you want to keep on being used, you can restore the dead code. If you have a project and you want to get rid of it, documentation is your friend. Update your README, please. Tell your users that you are going away. This is helpful. You want to make sure that people know that your code isn't going to be updated anymore. You want to mark it as inactive if that's the choice that you're going with. Linking to a better solution is really helpful because otherwise you're going to have people asking, what should I use? What should I use? What should I use? Leaving a forwarding address, take this one with a grain of salt because if you leave a forwarding address, people will forward you things for a while. The wonderful urban legend of having the original creator of a particular Python framework have their email, personal email, as a contact in settings.py and keeping on receiving emails asking for help years later. Or because GitHub README badges are so cool right now, well, they were, you could put something like this in. Unmaintained.tech has this wonderful manifesto that is really helpful if you can't find the words yourself to say, go away. Or GitHub allows you to transfer ownership of repos, and the process is kind of straightforward. You need to work out where the repo is going to end up. You need to have someone that is an admin of both organizations, the old one and the new one. And then there's this wonderful little settings hidden in the settings with a great big red button that says transfer ownership. And you can move your repo across organizations or users, which is really, really, really helpful because GitHub does a whole lot of nice things for you. All the PRs, issues, and commits will keep existing. There is an implicit 301 redirect. If somebody goes to Glazen/project and I move it to say Richard, if someone goes there, it'll immediately redirect them to Richard Jones/project. It's really cool. But I should make sure that I don't reuse that namespace under my own repo because otherwise things break. And you get the commit bit, which is really cool if you want to continue using the project and be able to actually edit it. If you find a project that seems empty, dead, check their README before you start anything. Python references. Check the history, check when the release was last stable. See if they have anything mentioned in their release notes about them abandoning it. Check whether it's been marked as stable. It may be completely fine and there are no issues whatsoever. See if they're looking for someone. See if they have a mailing list, an IRC channel. It might not actually be dead. Check if it's inactive. Is there a better solution that you should be using anyway? And could you be the new maintainer? Are they actively looking for someone to take it over? And there's probably going to be more factors in play here. It could come down to politics, pet projects, authors that aren't conducive to outside help, or so many other factors. But the ability to openly communicate is one facet of open source that makes it amazing. So the go-to rule is to ask. People have put a whole lot of effort into their solutions, so help make them timeless. Thank you for your time. Yay, woo, mock cheers, I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet, I'm still going. But that was really good to finally actually give that talk. A term I didn't know at the time was GitHub generation, like Slack generation, millennials, all those wonderful buzzwords. I am so GitHub generation and I don't care. I wear that badge with pride. But if you want to have a more comprehensive look into this, you should go to another talk this afternoon. The conference does provide. VM Brazil is giving Passing the Baton Succession Planning for Your Project talk. It's going to be really good. I've seen it. It's great. So for those playing at home, what solution did I end up going with for my project? Well, combination of that wonderful no maintenance intended badge and a transfer of ownership. So if anyone is actually interested, this is where my software now lives. This organisation name wasn't chosen by me, it was chosen by one of my former co-workers, and I think it perfectly encapsulates our thoughts about what we'd created. So if you're interested in an ultra-high performance time series data storage system written in Haskell, or a web-based cross-origin time series data visualization tool written in Ruby, there you go. Back to Brisbane, back to 2015, and back to that Sunday afternoon. Trying to find how to talk about a talk was consuming me that afternoon. I was in the midst of having a breakdown trying to work out how to give this talk. So much so that I've actually had to ask other people who were there what happened, even though I was there, but I wasn't there. So I've had to research my own personal history for this talk. It's great. So according to all accounts, that Sunday afternoon, I did not look right. I was stressed out in the break leading up to the talk. I was trying to edit my slides at the last minute. Pro tip, don't. One thing I do distinctly remember is making my way around to the Kennedy room at the venue, laptop in hand, and taking a straight look down into the room, seeing the podium there and having the whole dolly zoom effect and me going, nope. And you know what they said? It's okay. Come over here and sit down. They planned for this. The session chair and the room monitor knew I wasn't okay. I didn't have to do anything I wasn't completely comfortable with. If I didn't want to do the talk, that was okay. So immediately, waves of relief start washing over me. And then the regret sets in. They knew I was going to fail. I just let everyone down. I'm a terrible person. I shouldn't be here. I don't deserve to be here. I want to go home. Thankfully, I didn't have too much time to sink into this until a good friend strongly suggested that I go outside for some fresh air. And that was the trip that saved me from a nervous breakdown. I mean, I wasn't okay, but I knew I was going to be okay. What started as, let's get some fresh air, turned into, let's go get ice cream and find some puppies and go into full distraction mode. The puppies were only an icing on the cake. But I came back to the conference after that. I sat in the back of the room for the lightning talks at the end of the day, but I came back. That night, I didn't go home. I could have, but I stayed. I went out with a group of wonderful people to the noodle markets at South Bank. My phone was going off at this point with notifications because people wanted to know whether I was okay, what was wrong, where was I. Someone thought I had gastro. Sorry, Richard. But having that constant buzzing and pinging made me feel even worse. By mutual agreement, I gave my phone to a friend to hold on to so I wouldn't keep on being alerted and distracted. It also meant I couldn't leave the markets until I was okay, which was great because otherwise I could have still run away. That evening I ate something, I guess. I really don't remember, but having a group of people that wanted me around even though I'd failed that afternoon was something that was really rare and special and really important to me. The next day, I came back. I could have hid, but I didn't. I wanted to stay around this amazing group of people that wanted me around. The Monday and the Tuesday were the development sprint days, and these were the sprints that I first heard about Beware, and the rest is history. If I'd have left, I wouldn't have come back at all. I would have felt I could never show my face in front of this group of people again. But I did come back, and I came back the next year, and now I'm here. Yay. It hasn't been smooth sailing for me since Brisbane. Speaker anxiety is just the start. I've been through the ringer in the last year especially, but I've also had a lot of good things happen because last month I started a new job for the first time actually working with Python at Divio, and wonderful co-workers are here and it's like, yay! And yeah, I've never been a Python dev before. That's kind of cool. And also after Brisbane, I sought professional help about my anxiety because seriously, if you think you have any sort of problem with anxiety, stress, depression, please see a professional. If you're covered under Medicare in Australia, you get Medicare rebates for up to 12 sessions in a year. It is not a burden on the system. There is an entire structure set up for people that need to see a professional. Talk to your GP, get a referral. There are also a whole bunch of wonderful organisations dedicated to having people in tech talk about these things and reducing the stigma of mental health, including Blue Hackers, Open Sourcing Mental Illness, and Prompt. Prompt is running a Indiegogo project right now, and they are raising money for the next year so they can help send speakers to conferences to talk about this stuff. I had stickers outside on the table, but they kind of disappeared. I've been seeing a professional for help for a few years now. I'm not taking any medication, but I have a whole suite of tools that help me. And I still get anxious, especially over talks and especially over this one. I've had too many sleepless nights just trying to work out how to best word this talk. I've spent hours talking to people, getting their consultation, research reviews, to make sure that this talk was okay. I mean, I can yell about emoji until the cows come home, but this talk, being vulnerable on stage, it's hard. Tech talks are easy. And as Richard mentioned, I wasn't his first choice at Keynote, so I had all of 5 weeks to pull this together. But I wanted to. I knew I could, and that's the big thing. Plus the fact that this talk slot opened because of another speaker dropping out, and I'm giving a talk about the time that I was the speaker that dropped out, and then I could give the talk at the conference. It works. But I know what you might be thinking. There's probably someone in the second to third back row zoned out looking at their phone right now that doesn't give a rat's. Forking is just a button on a website. Oh my God, it's just, you got fired, ho-hum, woman has feelings, news at 11. I wonder how long it is till morning tea. The best part about doing this talk with meta commentary is I can call you out if you exist. Because you know what's more important? Empathy. If you weren't in my shoes, if you didn't suffer the trauma, then sure, it could just be a button on a website to you. But it's more than that. This community talks about stuff other than tech. Sure, the tools are important, the technical eccentricities behind them are interesting, but they're tools to solve problems that humans have, and technology can't solve all the problems that humans have. This community is empathetic and open to different views and experiences and change, and technical talks are easy, people talks are hard. Soft talks, that's bull. This is hard. And that's why you should be listening. Since Brisbane, I am now, by all accounts, an accomplished speaker and a member of this community. The other hat rack talk from the same PyCon, I've given that as a keynote twice. I've helped run conferences all over the world and spoken at more to boot. I've done everything from stacking chairs to being the master of ceremonies for an entire event to being on papers committees, councils and committees. I haven't been the core organizer of an event yet. I've run fake conferences. I haven't run a real one. For the benefit of the recording, there was a tiny little voice that just said, KDConf. I've tried to just give back something to this amazing community for everything it's done for me, and it'll never be enough, but I hope it's something. And what's helped me get through all of this is the amazing community. I mean, just having people that want me around is more helpful than you can ever imagine. I mean, of note, this particularly lovely group of people here who are all sitting here. You may notice from the start of my talk I mentioned Paul Fenwick. He's in that photo. With his permission, I want to share a small story that shows just how the little things can help someone feel welcome in the community. I often get the opportunity to go to conferences for communities that I'm not a part of, and one of those is DevWorld. DevWorld is wonderful. I think they still have tickets available. You should go to DevWorld. They have amazing donuts. So I'm in a pub in Melbourne that has a plane in it, as you do. There's a plane hiding in that picture. The only reasons that I'm at DevWorld is A, I got a free ticket, and B, after seeing the speaker lineup, I say, and I quote, oh my God, Paul Fenwick is keynoting, oh my God, I must go to DevWorld. I remembered Paul keynoting for my first ever open source conference and regretted the opportunity to not say hi. I think there may have been a whole meeting the Queen moment afterwards, but after you give a talk, you really don't remember who comes up to you afterwards, especially if you've never met them before. So I doubted that he remembered me. So I'm at the dinner, and Paul arrives, and I get the opportunity to say hi. And I tell him how excited I am to see him speak, because he was a really big factor in the whole thing that I started public speaking. And he later told me that it was my enthusiasm for looking forward to hearing him speak that made him feel more at ease in a community that he's not normally a part of, and where he felt like an imposter. And this is coming from Paul frickin' Fenwick, all right? He's amazing. Letting people know that you have been looking forward to seeing them speak, wishing them luck for speaking, and actively enjoying their company, that's what makes a great community. Going from just an event name that you've heard of before into an annual pilgrimage to see friends and gather with your people, that's what makes an amazing community. Having a group of people that actively help each other, either by actively volunteering to help run events, reaching out to those in their communities that need a little bit more help, that's what makes an incredible community. And it doesn't have to be the huge things. It can be the little things to make people feel more included. If a speaker asks for questions, making sure there's at least one, even if it's from you. Offering to sit with someone at lunch, if you're a local, recommending a restaurant or a cafe. The little things to help attendees, having a quiet room, making sure that there's accessible lifts and ramps into your venue, making sure someone's name is spelled correctly on their lanyard, having stenographers, sign language interpreters, non-alcoholic beverages, veggie options, kosher meals, volunteering to help out if there's someone that needs a hand, being there, and even just actively listening. Because this community is freaking amazing. I mean, take this picture. There's multiple now plushie group family photos, because there are many people in this group that have plushie animals that travel around with them. This is Monium. It's a panda, Pandemonium. Thank you. On Twitter as well. And people have their little plushies that they like to sit on lecterns during their talk and help out in video blogs and all the rest. I've not just met people through this community, I've made good friends, and that's something that I've never had before. I was that quiet girl sitting in the library at school. I found computers could do cool things, and I found my people. And you may only get to see them once a year at these kind of conferences. You may only interact with them on bug trackers or on IRC, but the people in open source and Python and Django, they can be your friends. And it's because of this amazing group of people that I'm here and that I'm still here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I got some presents, but the hug was better.
Yeah, that's cool.
All right, thank you, Katie. No questions, so we've got more time to leave the room. And I'm sure Katie will be out in the foyer for chats and hugs during the break.
Hugs, definitely, yeah.
Thank you again, Katie.